It was past office hours, and you were still sitting at your desk, staring at the pile of work in front of you. The air in the room felt heavy, filled with tension that words couldn't explain. Jungkook, your boss, who once was the love of your life, had been nothing but harsh lately. His cold instructions, sharp remarks, and impossible deadlines felt like a punishment, though you couldn't figure out why. 3 years ago, everything was so different. You and Jungkook had been madly in love. It was the kind of love that made you dream of a happy future together, where nothing could go wrong. But back then, you didn't know that a storm was waiting to destroy everything. Something much bigger than the two of you had come between your love, and you both had been caught in its chaos. Jungkook was standing behind the glass wall. His sharp gaze was fixed on you as you worked tirelessly at your desk. You won't leave until it's finished. His cold, emotionless voice was still ringing in your ears. Those were the last words he had said before giving you yet another impossible task. You had simply nodded, staying silent. For the past 6 months, this had become your life. The man who once loved you deeply, who would do anything to make you happy, was now your boss, and every word, every emotion of his carried a bitterness that showed just how much he hates you now. The clock struck 11:30 and the office was silent except for the sound of your typing. Everyone else had left hours ago, but you were still at your desk, struggling to find the report Jungkook had demanded. Your hands were trembling from exhaustion as you typed the last line. Finally, you stood up, gathering the papers, and hesitated before walking towards his office door. Taking a deep breath, you knocked softly. "Come in." His voice came from the other side, cold and emotionless. Pushing the door open, you stepped inside. His figure loomed behind the desk, the soft glow of his monitor illuminating his sharp features. His eyes didn't leave the screen as you approached. "I finished the reports you asked for," you said, placing the stack of papers on his desk. Without sparing you a glance, Jungkook continued typing. "Leave it there. I'll look at it in the morning." He purposely does that to hurt you. You blinked, unable to hide your disbelief, but you said it was urgent. "And now it's not. Unless you have something else to say, you're free to leave," he interrupted while his tone was cold as usual. Your fingers curled into fists at your sides. "You knew I stayed back for hours to finish this," you said, your voice trembling with restrained frustration. He finally looked up, his dark eyes locking onto yours. They were void of warmth, a stark contrast to the man you once knew. "And I didn't ask for your commentary on how you spend your time," he said bitterly. The words stung, but you refused to back down. "Why do you do this, Jungkook? Why do you go out of your way to make things harder for me?" He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest as he regarded you with a cold, calculating gaze. "Why do you think? Maybe I'm just teaching you the value of responsibility, something you clearly lack." Your breath hitched. His words cut deeper than you wanted to admit. "If you hate me so much, why don't you just fire me and get it over with?" you asked. Your voice trembled despite your efforts to remain composed. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, something raw, something unspoken, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. His lips twisted into a cruel smirk. "Firing you would be too easy. Watching you struggle is far more satisfying." The bitterness in his tone broke something inside you. You stood there frozen. Your heart ached with pain you couldn't explain. "You are trying to satisfy yourself by seeing me in pain. I don't understand what I did to deserve this." Jungkook's jaw tightened and his gaze hardened once more. "That's the problem with you. You never understand." There was a very deep and hidden pain in his eyes mixed with anger. Your legs felt shaky as his words stayed in your mind like a heavy weight. There were so many things you wanted to say, so many questions you wanted to ask, but it felt like he had built a big strong wall around himself that you couldn't get through. You gave a small nod, trying hard not to cry as your eyes filled with tears. "Good night," you said quietly before turning and walking out of the room. After you left, Jungkook leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply. His hand ran through his hair as he stared at the report you had left. He picked it up, scanning through the pages, and his fingers brushed against the corner where you had written a small note apologizing for any error due to the rush. Still the same. He muttered to himself, his voice soft and pained. He hated himself for being so cruel. But every time he saw you, the memories of his ruined family and broken trust resurfaced. Yet deep down, the love he had for you remained buried under layers of anger and guilt. He glanced at a picture frame hidden in his drawer, a photo of the two of you from years ago, smiling and carefree. "Why can't I let you go?" he whispered. His voice was barely audible. You were once just an ordinary employee working at one of the companies under the John family's vast business empire. Your career took a turn when you were assigned to work directly under Jungkook's older brother, Junghyun, a man known for his brilliance and charm. It was during this time when you met Jungkook, Junghyun's younger brother. Unlike Junghyun, Jungkook had a quiet intensity driven by his dreams of carving his own path rather than simply inheriting the family legacy. When Jungkook grew close, despite coming from different worlds, he saw something in you that made him open up, and soon your bond turned into a deep, passionate love. Though your relationship remained a secret, those were some of the happiest days of your life. Jungkook often spoke about how he wanted to break free from his family shadow and prove himself, not as Junghyun's younger brother but as his own man. However, your happiness was short-lived. While working on an important project for Junghyun, you stumbled upon evidence of illegal activities tied to him, proof of deals that could ruin the company and the John family's reputation. It was a discovery that shocked you to your core, and you were left with a terrible decision to make. At first, you debated staying silent, knowing how much Jungkook valued his family despite their strained dynamics. But as time went on, the weight of the secret became unbearable. You convinced yourself that exposing the truth was the right thing to do, believing it would ultimately protect Jungkook from the fallout of his brother's actions. The decision to report Junghyun anonymously to the authorities set off a chain of events you could never have imagined. The scandal exploded, and Junghyun was arrested, bringing disgrace to the John family. The company's image was shattered, and even though Jungkook was innocent, his name was tarnished by association. His parents, furious and humiliated, disowned him, blaming him for letting someone like you into their inner circle. Jungkook lost everything overnight: his family, his reputation, and the life he had worked so hard to build. In the aftermath, his pain turned into anger, and he directed all of it at you. He saw your actions not as an attempt to help, but as a betrayal of the trust you once shared. The last time you saw him, his words were harsh and final, cutting through you like a knife. Years later, fate brings you back into Jungkook's life when you join his company as a skilled employee. Jungkook, now a cold and distant CEO, seemed determined to make things hard for you. He gives you impossible tasks and keeps his behavior icy, never showing any warmth. But what he doesn't realize is that the feeling from your past still quietly live in his heart. What Jungkook doesn't know is that you are pregnant with his child. It happened 3 months ago after one emotional night when a heated argument brought back old memories, leading to a moment neither of you could resist. That night left both of you confused and hurt. You have decided to keep your pregnancy a secret, not wanting to make things harder for him or make your already fragile connection even more complicated. It was evening and the office was still busy, the sound of the tapping of keys as you worked on the paperwork Jungkook had given you. Your body felt heavy from the long day and your eyes burned from staring at the screen for so long. Your mind was a blur and every task felt harder than the last. You glanced at the clock, it was near the end of office hours. Suddenly your phone buzzed. It was a message from Jungkook. "My office now." You rubbed your tired eyes and sighed, knowing you couldn't ignore him. Standing up slowly, you walked towards his office. When you knocked and heard his voice say, "Come in," you stepped inside. Jungkook was sitting at his desk, looking at a file, barely glancing up when you entered. "Close the door," he said. His voice was cold as usual. You did as he asked, closing the door quietly behind you. "You wanted to see me?" you asked, trying to keep your voice steady despite the exhaustion you were feeling. Jungkook tossed a file across the desk. "I need an explanation for this," he said. His tone was as cold as ever. You opened the file and saw it was the report you had submitted earlier. Your stomach sank. There was mistakes in it, more than you realized. You had worked late the night before to get it done, but now you saw it wasn't good enough. I'll fix it right away, you said quietly, feeling defeated. He didn't respond immediately. His eyes stayed on the screen in front of him. You should have done it right the first time. You know I expect more from you, right? You could feel the frustration building inside. I've been staying late for days, Jungkook. I'm doing my best, but then try harder. He cut you off. His voice was harsh. This isn't the first time I've had to remind you. His words stung. You stood there trying to hold it together, but the frustration, exhaustion, and the constant reminder of your failure were getting to you. Why do you always treat me like this? Why do you still punish me for that? Jungkook looked at you with a bitter smile. Don't act so innocent, Ryan. You know what you exactly did, and you were so proud of your choices that you made by ignoring me even when I begged you. Now don't expect me to be easy on you. This is nothing compared to what you did to me and my family. I did that to you and I never asked. He suddenly raised his voice, making you flinch. I begged you to not do that. I told you to, it will ruin everything. It will ruin everything we had. But you were too blind to see that. You didn't want anything good for me. It was your own plan to make our rival company rise to fame. So congratulations, you succeeded, but you lost everything between us. You knew he wouldn't believe you no matter how many times you explained to him. With tears in your eyes, you left the office while he threw a vase angrily on the floor in anger. Every meeting of yours ends up in argument. Hiding your tears from others, you came back to your desk. You tried to focus, but it was impossible. Your head throbbed, your stomach churned, and you felt like you couldn't keep your eyes open any longer. There was already a rumor between the employees that something was going on between the CEO and you. The pressure of the day, his harsh words, and everything you had been holding inside were too much. You leaned back in your chair, blinking rapidly, but the darkness was coming too fast. Before you knew it, everything went dark. Jungkook was busy in his work, but his mind was still filled with the thoughts of you. He doesn't hate you, but the fact that he suffered so much, his family's name and reputation dragged in mud, but still you think that you did right. Their rival company took advantage of their loss, and his family's name strained for life. His secretary was explaining to him the upcoming schedule when his phone rang. Excuse me, sir. He checked his phone. Oh no. Jungkook looked at him. What happened? Miss Kim Wyan from finance department. Jungkook got up hearing that. What happened to her? A staff member notified that she collapsed at her desk. They called the ambulance. Before he could even finish, Jungkook was already outside the office. He didn't waste a second. Jungkook didn't waste a second after hearing the news. His heart was pounding as he hurried out of his cabin, leaving a confused Mr. Kim behind. The finance department was just a short walk from his office, but every step felt like an eternity. His mind was spinning with thoughts, worry etched on his face even as he tried to suppress it. As he approached, the sight of a small crowd of employees standing near your desk made his chest tighten further. They quickly parted when they saw him, and then he saw you, slumped over in your chair, unconscious. Your face looked pale and lifeless. For a moment, Jungkook froze. His carefully built walls cracked as he took in the sight of you, so vulnerable and fragile. A sharp pang of guilt and fear pierced through him. He hadn't seen you like this before. Why is everyone standing here? Did anyone call the ambulance? One of the employees stammered. Yes, sir, the ambulance is on its way. That's not enough. Move. He stepped closer to you. When you remained unresponsive, Jungkook didn't wait for the ambulance. He scooped you up in his arms effortlessly, ignoring the whispers and startled looks from the employees around him. His focus was solely on you. Clear the way. He bowed, his tone leaving no room for any argument. As he carried you out of the finance department and towards the building's private parking lot, his mind raced. He couldn't shake the image of you collapsing, the exhaustion on your face that he had ignored so many times before. Severe exhaustion and dehydration. Has she been under a lot of stress lately? The doctor said, looking at Jungkook. He didn't respond. He knew he's the reason behind it, and the guilt was visible on his face. Will she be okay? He finally asked. His voice was quiet but strained. She'll recover with rest and proper care, but she needs to reduce her stress levels. As her eyelids fluttered open, the harsh white light of the hospital room greeted you. Your head felt heavy and your body weak, but the murmurs of voices around you brought you back to reality. She's awake. Miss Kim, how are you feeling? You blinked slowly, trying to adjust to your surroundings. Your gaze shifted and your heart skipped a beat when you saw Jungkook standing by the corner of the room. His face was pale, his expression a mixture of panic and relief. His usual composed look was gone, replaced by something raw and vulnerable. I'm fine, you whispered. The doctor nodded, checking your vitals once more before speaking. You collapsed due to severe stress and dehydration, but there's something else we need to address. You frowned slightly, unsure of what she meant. Jungkook's gaze was locked on you, but he didn't say a word. Miss Kim, you're pregnant, about 2 months along. I had estimated. I assume you were already aware of this. Jungkook's heart stopped for a second. He looked at you while you looked away. He realized that you already knew about this. Pregnant? 2 months? He asked, stepping closer while the doctors nodded. He instantly realized that it happened that night and you're mostly with him from past 6 months, so there was no room for doubt. Doctor cleared her throat, awkwardly sensing the charged atmosphere. I'll leave you two to discuss. Please focus on rest and hydration for now. She left swiftly, leaving the two of you alone. The room was thick with tension as the doctor left. Jungkook's eyes were on you while you couldn't able to look at him. He came near you. How long were you planning to hide this? His voice was low yet sharp enough to make you flinch. You met his gaze, your throat tightened. I didn't know. He scoffed in disbelief. You didn't know? And if you had, would you have told me? Or would this have been another thing you kept from me, Vian? His words hit like daggers. Your eyes burned, but you refused to let the tears fall. Why does it matter to you, Jungkook? Would you even believe me if I told you? It's yours. The air shifted, his jaw clenched and fist curled at his sides. How can you say that? Because you have made it clear that you'll never trust me again. Every day you punish me. You look at me like I'm the reason your world fell apart. You hate me, Jungkook. Admit it. Hate you? His voice was dangerously low now and he took another step forward. Do you know what I have been through because of you? My family's reputation, years of hard work, dragged through the mud. My name became a joke, my company a target for our rivals, all because of your decision. He recoiled as his words stuck deep, but he wasn't finished. And do you think I didn't beg you? I begged you, Ian. I begged you not to do it, not to betray me like that, and still you chose to listen to yourself. Do you have any idea what it felt like to be left standing there, knowing the person I... He stopped himself. The tears finally spilled over as you cried. I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it to save you. If I hadn't, Jungkook, they would have destroyed you completely. I thought I was protecting you, but you never let me explain. You let me alone to deal with all the guilt and shame. You didn't protect me. You destroyed me. Do you think I've been fine all these years, watching everything I built fall apart, watching my family suffer while I... You think I haven't suffered? You interrupted, your voice was breaking. I live with the guilt every single day. I've cried myself to sleep every night wondering if I made the right choice. And you never even gave me the chance to explain. You just left. He ran a hand through his hair, his frustration was visible. What explanation would have been enough, Ian? Tell me, how could you justify turning my life into a mess? Because I loved you. You screamed, the words bursted out of you before you could stop them. The room fell silent, his eyes widened for a fraction of a second before his expression softened. But he quickly masked it again. I still do, and I thought I was doing the right thing, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should have just let everything fall apart instead of trying to save someone who never wanted to see my side of things. Jungkook stood there froze in place as your sobs echoed in the room. He wanted to say something, anything, but the weight of his emotions kept him rooted to the spot. The love he had buried deep within him surged to the surface, battling with the bitterness that had consumed him for so long. Ryan, his voice cracked softer now, but you didn't look at him. You were too lost in your pain, too exhausted to care anymore. He hesitated before taking a cautious step closer, then another. Finally, he knelt in front of you. His hand trembled as he reached out to gently lift your face to meet his gaze. You think I don't feel anything? You think I hated you? No, Ryan. I hated the situation. I hated that I couldn't fix it, that I couldn't stop you from making that choice. But I could never hate you. Your tear-streaked eyes locked onto his, searching for the truth in his words. You left me, Jungkook. You left me when I needed you the most. His head dipped, shame flashing across his face. I know I was a coward. I was so angry, so hurt that I didn't even try to understand. I thought it was easier to walk away. But you punished me for it. Every time you looked at me, every time you ignored me, it felt like I was dying all over again. I punished you because I didn't know how to deal with what I was feeling. I wanted to forget, to move on, but I couldn't. Every time I saw you, it reminded me of everything I lost and everything I still wanted. Your breath hissed as his words sank in. He cupped your face with both hands, his thumb brushing away a tear. I still want you, Ryan. Even after everything, I never stopped loving you. I try to convince myself that I didn't, but I can't lie to myself anymore. I love you. The sincerity in his eyes broke the last of your defenses. Do you mean that? I mean it. I don't want to lose you again. Not now, not ever. Squirmed as fresh tears spilled over, but this time they weren't from pain. Tentatively, you reached out, your fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt as if afraid he might disappear. Then don't leave me. Stay, please. He pulled you into his arms, holding you tightly against him as if anchoring himself to you. I'm not going anywhere, Ryan, not anymore. And I'm sorry for being too harsh. Stayed like that for what felt like forever, wrapped in each other's embrace. Everything from the past became clear now. We'll figure this out. Everything. The baby, us, all of it, together. You nodded, thank you. For the first time in years, hope bloomed between you, a fragile yet undeniable promise of a new beginning.